There was once a young woman named Laila who dreamed of speaking English fluently. She read books, practiced with friends, and watched films, yet she often felt her progress was too slow. One night, while reading The Power of the Subconscious Mind, she came across the idea that the brain never truly stops working, not even during sleep. That thought stayed with her. The next evening, she placed her headphones on the pillow beside her and let an English audiobook play softly as she drifted off. At first, it felt strange, almost pointless. The words flowed past her ears as she slipped into dreams, and she wondered if any of it mattered. But in the morning, she woke with fragments of phrases still echoing in her mind. It was as though her brain had carried the words with her through the night. Encouraged, Layla made it a routine. Each night she listened to simple English stories, calm voices repeating phrases she wanted to learn. She did not force herself to stay awake. Instead, she trusted the process. Over time, she noticed changes. Her ear grew more familiar with the rhythm of English. Words that once sounded heavy now seemed lighter, easier to recognize. The magic was not in one night, but in many. Night after night, the repetition sank deeper, planting seeds in her memory. During the day, when she practiced speaking, she found those words rising more naturally. What she had absorbed in her sleep became useful in her waking life. Sometimes she doubted whether it was really working, but she reminded herself that progress often hides before it shows. She understood that sleep learning was not a shortcut, but a helper, a quiet partner to her daily practice. The combination of listening while asleep and speaking while awake gave her confidence like never before. Her friends began to notice. They were surprised at how her sentences flowed more smoothly, how her listening had sharpened. Layla simply smiled and said, "I let English live with me even in my dreams." In time, she realized that learning a language was not about force, but about gentle, steady exposure. By letting English become part of her nights, she discovered that even rest could become a teacher. And with patience, consistency, and belief, she proved that sometimes the quietest methods lead to the strongest results. The mind continues to learn, even while resting. Layla discovered this one night when she fell asleep with an English audiobook still playing beside her. She hadn't planned it, it just happened. In the morning, she woke up with a strange feeling, as if the words she had heard were still floating somewhere in her thoughts. It wasn't clear, not like studying with a pen and paper, but it was there, lingering in her memory. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. Could the mind really work while the body was resting? But the more she paid attention, the more she noticed it. Phrases she barely remembered hearing in her sleep would suddenly come back to her during the day. When someone spoke, she found herself recognizing words more quickly, almost as if her brain had been practicing in the background while she was dreaming. She realized that the mind never truly shuts down. Even in sleep, it continues to sort, absorb, and connect information. Just as a student may fall asleep after reading and wake up remembering the lesson more clearly, she saw that her brain was quietly learning, making sense of the sounds it had heard. For Layla, this became a kind of secret discovery. Rest was no longer wasted time. It was another chance to grow. And the simple awareness that her mind could keep learning while her body rested filled her with hope. It meant that even the quiet hours of the night could carry her closer to her dream of speaking English fluently. Repetition strengthens memory during sleep. Layla began to notice that when she listened to the same English phrases night after night, they started to stick in her mind in surprising ways. At first, the sentences felt like soft background noise, drifting in and out of her dreams, but after several nights, she realized she could recall whole expressions without even trying. It was as if the steady rhythm of repetition had carved paths into her memory while she slept. She remembered reading once that the brain repeats and organizes what it learns during the day when we are asleep, almost like a librarian sorting books onto the right shelves. By hearing the same English words again and again, she gave her brain something simple to work with, and sleep did the rest. What seemed invisible at night revealed itself in small victories during the day. Recognizing a word in a movie, recalling a phrase while speaking, or even answering faster when someone asked her a question. It wasn't magic, but it felt magical. Laila understood that repetition was not about force, but about gentle consistency. The more often her brain heard the same sound patterns, the more familiar they became, until using them felt natural. Sleep was not replacing effort, it was strengthening it, quietly polishing her memory in ways she couldn't do while awake. And with each repeated phrase, her confidence grew. She realized that every night offered her another chance to build her memory, not through pressure or stress, but through the quiet power of listening again and again. A calm environment makes learning easier. Laila soon realized that the way she set up her nights mattered just as much as the words she listened to. On some evenings, when her room was filled with noise from the street or the television in the other room, the English phrases felt scattered, almost lost in the air. But on nights when she dimmed the lights, closed the window, and let the room grow quiet, the voices in her headphones seemed clearer, softer, easier to follow. She noticed that her mind mirrored her surroundings. When everything around her was restless, her thoughts felt restless too. But when her space was calm, her mind became calm, and the English words flowed into her more smoothly. It reminded her of how water reflects the sky. Still water shows the stars clearly, but rough water breaks their image. In the same way, a calm environment allowed her brain to reflect and hold on to what it heard. She began making small changes to prepare herself each night. She placed her phone away from distractions, lowered the volume so the words felt gentle instead of loud, and sometimes even lit a small candle before sleeping, letting its glow remind her that this was her time to learn in peace. The calmness didn't just help her sleep, it made her more open to absorbing English without effort. Laila realized that learning was not always about pushing harder, but about creating the right space for the mind to do its quiet work. And in the stillness of her nights, with the soft rhythm of English playing beside her, she felt as though both her body and her dreams were learning together. Listening to English while sleeping trains the ear naturally. Laila discovered this one morning when she overheard a conversation on the bus. A stranger used a phrase she had been hearing in her sleep for weeks, and before she could even think, she understood it. The words felt familiar, as if they had already passed through her ears many times before. She realized that her nightly listening was quietly shaping her ability to recognize sounds, rhythms, and tones without effort. When she was awake, she often struggled to catch every word in fast English conversations. But in sleep, there was no pressure, no need to answer or translate, only listening. Her ear was learning in the most natural way, just as a child listens to the sounds of language long before speaking their first word. It wasn't about forcing understanding, but allowing her brain to soak in the music of the language. The repetition of voices, the rising and falling tones, and the way words connected together became part of her dreams. Sometimes she even woke up with those voices echoing in her mind, as if her ear had continued practicing all night. She began to notice subtle changes. She could mimic accents more closely, repeat sentences more smoothly, and recognize words in songs or films that once felt impossible. For Laila, this was a breakthrough. She realized that her ear was like a musician's instrument, and every night of listening was practice. Even while her body rested, her ear was being trained to hear English the way it was meant to be heard. And over time, that natural training gave her the confidence to speak with more ease, because the sounds no longer felt foreign. They felt like part of her. Small daily exposure builds long-term fluency. At first, Laila didn't notice much change from listening each night. A few words here, a phrase there, it seemed too little, too slow. But as weeks passed, she began to understand that the true power was not in a single night, but in the quiet repetition over many nights. Just as a river shapes stone drop by drop, her nightly exposure to English was shaping her fluency, one sound at a time. She remembered how, when she was younger, she learned her native language. It wasn't through long lessons or heavy study. It was through hearing the same words every day, in small doses, until they became natural. English, she realized, worked the same way. Even if she only heard a few new phrases at night, the steady contact built familiarity that her mind could not forget. The beauty of small exposure was that it didn't overwhelm her. She didn't need hours of study to see progress. Just listening a little each night made English feel less like a subject to be mastered and more like a companion she carried with her everywhere, even in her dreams. Over time, those nightly drops gathered into something much larger. When she spoke, her sentences flowed more easily because her brain had quietly collected the sounds, the rhythm, and the patterns while she slept. It was proof that even the smallest steps, repeated daily, could create fluency that lasted a lifetime. Sleep learning works best when combined with active practice. Laila soon discovered this truth after a moment of surprise. One morning, she recognized a phrase she had been hearing every night in her sleep. The words were clear in her mind, yet when she tried to speak them aloud, her tongue stumbled, and the sentence came out broken. It was then she realized that listening alone was not enough. Her ears were learning, but her voice also needed practice. So she began a new routine. At night, she let English play softly as she drifted into sleep, and during the day, she made time to repeat those same words out loud. Sometimes she read them from a book, sometimes she copied them into a journal, and sometimes she simply whispered them to herself while walking. The combination created a powerful effect. What her mind absorbed in sleep became easier to use when her mouth practiced while awake. It reminded her of a musician who listens to a song many times and then picks up an instrument to play it. Hearing the melody is the first step, but touching the strings or keys is what makes the music real. In the same way, hearing English while sleeping planted the knowledge, but speaking and writing during the day made it grow strong. Laila noticed progress much faster this way. Words no longer stayed trapped in her memory. They flowed into her conversations. Sleep learning had become her quiet teacher, but practice during the day was the tool that gave her fluency. Together, they worked like two halves of the same key, unlocking the language she once thought was beyond her reach. Consistency turns simple routines into powerful habits. At first, Laila treated sleep learning as an experiment, something she might try for a few nights and then forget. But when she kept going, night after night, the routine began to feel natural, almost like brushing her teeth before bed. What once felt like effort soon became automatic, and that was when the real change began. She noticed that consistency didn't just make her better at English, it made the process easier. She no longer had to remind herself or struggle with motivation. Her body and mind expected it. Just as a runner feels strange if they miss their daily jog, Laila felt something missing if she skipped a night of listening. The habit itself became her quiet teacher, keeping her steady even when she felt tired or unmotivated. Over weeks, the small actions piled up into something far greater than she had imagined. Her ear had become sharper, her memory stronger, her confidence higher, all because she stayed consistent. She realized that consistency was less about discipline and more about rhythm, a daily song that played until it became part of her life. The beauty of this truth was simple. By showing up each night, she didn't just practice English, she built a habit that carried her forward without effort. And once a habit is formed, it becomes a powerful force, guiding you long after motivation fades. Relaxation helps the brain absorb language effortlessly. Laila realized this one evening when she came home exhausted. Instead of worrying about whether she would remember new words, she simply lay down, let the soft English audio play, and allowed herself to drift into calmness. To her surprise, the next morning, she recalled several phrases more clearly than on nights when she tried too hard to stay focused. It was as if her relaxed state had opened a door in her mind that effort could not unlock. She began to notice a pattern. The nights when she felt tense, thinking about exams, repeating words in her head, or forcing herself to concentrate, were the nights when she woke up with little memory of what she had heard. But on the nights when she let go, breathing slowly and letting the words wash over her like gentle waves, she absorbed more without even trying. It reminded her of children learning to speak. They don't sit at a desk with worry in their hearts. They play, laugh, and listen freely. Their relaxed state allows their brains to capture the sounds of language naturally. Laila realized she could learn in the same way by allowing herself to relax and trust the process. The more she practiced this, the more she felt English weaving into her dreams. Words slipped into her memory without force, like seeds carried by the wind. She understood then that relaxation was not laziness. It was a powerful state of openness where learning could happen with ease. Belief in the process keeps motivation alive. In the early days, Laila sometimes doubted whether listening to English in her sleep was doing anything at all. The progress felt too slow, almost invisible. She wondered if she was only wasting time. But deep inside, she kept a small flame of belief alive. The thought that even if she couldn't see the results yet, something was happening quietly within her. That belief became her anchor. Each night she pressed play on the recordings, not because she felt instant change, but because she trusted the process, and slowly that trust began to pay off. She noticed herself recognizing phrases in films, catching words in conversations, and responding faster when someone spoke to her in English. Every small success was proof that her belief had kept her moving when doubt tried to stop her. She understood then that belief was more than positive thinking. It was fuel. Without it, she would have quit too soon, abandoning the seeds before they had time to grow. With it, she gave herself patience, time, and consistency, allowing her learning to bloom in its own season. Laila realized that the strongest learners are not always the fastest or the most talented. They are the ones who believe in their journey, even when the road feels slow. And so, her belief in the process became her greatest strength, turning nightly whispers of English into the voice of fluency she had always dreamed of.